will regulated militia be necessary to the security of a free state? The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. Glad you're with us on the program today. Yeah, we are going to be talking about the Senate gun deal, which apparently is headed for passage, a preliminary vote on Tuesday night, getting 64 ayes, including 14 Republicans. We're going to be talking on the program today with Florida Congressman Byron Donalds about why he is a no on this Senate gun deal. Not because he doesn't care, but because he says we cannot legislate based on emotion as opposed to facts and data and logic. Before we get to that conversation with the congressman, though, let's talk a little bit about the vote in the Senate yesterday. As I mentioned, 14 Republicans joining all 50 Democrats in voting for this bill, which will spend billions of dollars, apparently by delaying a Medicaid drug benefit for a year. That's going to free up some $21 billion in funding. So you're going to have billions of dollars spent on mental health programs, not just red flag laws, but other crisis intervention programs, school security. The problematic portions for gun owners come with the increased background checks for 18, 19, and 20-year-olds, where you're going to delve into their juvenile records, which, because these juvenile records are not a part of the NICS system, means that there's going to be, in essence, a de facto 3-day waiting period for 18, 19, and 20-year-olds purchasing firearms. And that could actually extend up to 10 business days. So now you're basically looking at what could be a 2-week delay to purchase a firearm if there are issues that pop up in that background check. There's also a new definition of what constitutes a commercial firearms dealer, basically somebody who should have a federal firearms license. Right now, the definition is vague. It's, if you are engaged in the business. This is also still fairly vague, to be honest with you. Maybe a little bit more clarity, but now it's basically if you are selling firearms primarily for a profit. In other words, you're not just selling a gun from your private collection, but you are buying a gun with the intention of selling it to somebody and then maybe using the proceeds to buy yourself another gun or two and then use it. Again, there's no hard or fast definition, which is going to be problematic, I think, in terms of prosecuting individuals who the federal government say should be federally licensed firearms dealers. But I think really the big issue here for a lot of people are either going to be the red flag provisions. And again, the grants do not have to go to set up red flag laws. There are other crisis intervention programs that will be eligible for these federal grants. And as I said, the background checks on 18, 19, and 20-year-olds, which will amount to a waiting period. And depending on who you talk to, folks might say, you know what, I'm okay with the red flag stuff, but I don't like the extended background checks and the waiting periods for young adults. You might have some folks say, that part doesn't bother me, but it's the red flag language that really bothers me. Again, at the end of the day, right now in the Senate, it looks like the folks who have a problem with the bill, at least to the point that they're not going to support it, are not going to be enough to prevent the bill from passing. So who are the 14 Republicans who voted in favor of at least proceeding with the initial debate? Now, again, they're going to try to get this passed by the end of this week. They want to get it out of the Senate before they go on recess. Here are the 14 Republicans. John Cornyn of Texas, no surprise. Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky. No surprise either that McConnell would vote to at least start the debate. He had said that he was, quote, hopeful that they could come up with a bipartisan solution that's directly related to the facts of this awful massacre. Tom Tillis of North Carolina, who was a part of the Senate negotiations. Susan Collins of Maine, who were a part of the Senate negotiations. Lindsey Graham of South Carolina. Bill Cassidy of Louisiana. All a part of those discussions. Roy Blunt of Missouri as well. He was part of the that group of 10 Republican senators, 4 of whom, by the way, are retiring this year, none of whom are up for election this year. Senator Richard Burr, another retiree who is giving his thumbs up to this deal. Mitt Romney of Utah, Senator Rob Portman of Ohio, also one of the 10 who endorsed the framework, who is not running, one of the 4, by the way, who's not running for re-election. Senator Shelley Moore Capito of West Virginia, who was, I think it's fair to say, kind of a surprise vote. Hadn't heard much from the West Virginia senator about this framework or this deal. Senator Joni Ernst of Iowa, also not one of the 10 Republicans who initially supported this framework. She said she wanted to review the legislative text before making a decision. She, though, had, according to The Hill, quote, signaled willingness to consider raising the minimum age for buying an AR-15 from 18 to 21. Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska as well. Senator Todd Young of Indiana, who voted to proceed on the legislation, which The Hill says was one of the biggest surprises to emerge on Tuesday. Young, a former Marine Corps intelligence officer, he had indicated, I believe on Monday, that he was hopeful that he could support what was in the final framework. And so, again, those are the 14 Republicans, not many of them up for election this year. In fact, I think Lisa Murkowski might be the only one of the 14 who is facing voters this fall. And, Murkowski has that sort of quote unquote independent streak, right? Helping to negotiate the infrastructure bill and now siding again with 13 other Republicans and all 50 Democrats in advancing the Senate gun deal on a preliminary vote. As I mentioned, the final vote likely coming before the senators skedaddle home for the Independence Day holiday. So join us to talk about why he is a no for now on this vote and why he is not a fan, again, of legislating by letting your emotions take the lead. Representative Byron Donalds of the great state of Florida joining us here on BarronArms.com. Take a look and a listen. Congressman, thank you so much for joining me here on Cam & Company to talk about, everything that's going on, quite frankly, including your op-ed at Fox News about why we cannot legislate based on emotion after the tragedies that we've seen in Buffalo, New York, and Uvalde, Texas. I thought your piece, honestly, was one of the best pieces of commentary that I've seen over the past few weeks, because you do get personal. You talk about your own experience growing up in Brooklyn, in what sounded like was a pretty high crime neighborhood back in the 1980s and early 90s. I'm just curious, how did that shape? We could probably talk an hour just about that, but how did that shape your view of gun control and the right to bear arms in self-defense?
Well, I mean, look, at the time, you're a kid. I was 16. I didn't really think much about gun control or anything at the time. It was just more, it was a scary thing that happened to me when I was at that age. It wasn't until I was much older and, especially, getting into the political world that you have to actually start thinking about the real outcomes of these policies. I actually had a lot of time between the event and actually what I learned and really what I learned about the Constitution and about human rights, individual rights, et cetera, individual liberties, to make a logical conclusion, to come to a logical conclusion. And for me, it was always that, the Second Amendment is there for a reason. It is to be protected for a reason. And even though in popular America, no matter where you might be, people might be willing to give up of that Second Amendment right to maintain a republic, you have to actually defend the Constitution, even at times when it's not popular. And so I've had the ability to detach from the emotional aspects because it was a long time ago, but still understanding what did occur when I was young, but having to do my job now as a member of Congress to uphold the Constitution.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, you do have to separate out the emotion, although it's hard to do. I mean, listen, we're talking about, 19 fourth graders who were murdered in a classroom in Texas. This impacts everybody. Yeah. If you're not affected by that, we should probably, talk. But at the same time, if you legislate based on emotion rather than the facts, rather than logic, rather than looking at, okay, well, what can we really do to try to make a difference here to stop these types of attacks from occurring? then all of a sudden now, as you say, you're saying, okay, well, let's ban our way to safety, right? Let's just ban the most commonly sold rifle in America today. Let's impact tens of millions of law-abiding Americans trying to stop one monster or one madman. And it seems to me that not only, again, are we in danger of flagrantly violating our Constitution when we do that, but we're probably ignoring, a lot of strategies that can actually have a much bigger and better impact.
I totally agree. Listen, Washington, and for that matter, state governments also, all governments really, they all have a habit of legislating emotionally to respond to the emotions of the body politic. But when you're an elected official, your number one duty, and I say this all the time when I'm looking at people running for office, is the number one quality I look for is restraint. Or do you have enough, emotional maturity to actually restrain yourself from just doing action just because you have the power in your hands to do so? Do you have the ability to actually take a step back and look at the situation logically and plan out the best path forward from a legislative perspective? Because up here on Capitol Hill, look, I'll give you two examples of emotional legislation. The first one was the Dodd-Frank financial regulatory reform under the Obama administration. We're coming out of the financial collapse. Everybody wants to blame everybody else. Washington, D.C. wanted to focus on the big banks. They put this massive financial regulatory bill together. What it actually did was make the big banks bigger, and it eviscerated community banks. Everybody knows it here on Capitol Hill, but at the time, Washington was looking for somebody to hold accountable. It was a highly emotional time because the economy was falling apart. Let's not even look 2 years ago and a year ago. COVID-19 policy. Elected officials all through the country were basically responding to a real fear amongst the electorate about COVID-19. But instead of looking at the data, like Ron DeSantis did and the state of Florida did, and the state of Texas did, instead of looking at the data and saying, you know what? Yes, there are real concerns, but we can actually manage the pandemic and get our economies back open and get our states back open. You had states like New York and California, Illinois, who just shut down for shutting down's sake, responding to the emotion. What has that led to? You have children in these blue states who are literally 2 years behind academically. They may never catch up. And so those are just two examples where you have to take yourself out of the emotions of the public at that particular point in time. Think about logical solutions. This is the key reason why we are a constitutional republic and not a pure democracy, because the framers were very concerned about the whims and the passions of the public at any given point in time. It requires cool heads to prevail. It requires people to maintain the Constitution in order for the republic to continue to be successful.
So what would you say we need to do then? If Americans are saying we need to do something, quote unquote, right, to address violent crime, we need to do something to make sure that our kids are safe in school, and gun control isn't the answer. What should we be doing? Where should we be looking?
Well, a couple of things. Number one is that there are serious mental health issues in the United States. I think that the federal government working with state governments, and I stress working with state governments, we need to actually do a much better job of trying to help people get their mental health issues resolved before they turn violent. That's number one. And I think that it's going to take us actually reinvesting in mental health. We used to do that extensively in the United States. We've gotten away from that. I think there's some lessons learned there from stuff that was done in the past, but we got to really reinvest in that. Number two, specifically to school security. Listen, at the shooting in Uvalde, the back door was unlocked. I don't know who left it unlocked, but that door was supposed to be locked according to the Uvalde School District's security protocols. It was not. The shooter basically turned the handle and walked inside. Number three, we're finding out right now today as we speak that the Uvalde Police Department did not engage the shooter, which is the protocol for training. That's been the protocol since Columbine, that you have to engage the shooters immediately. And so those are some of the failures that occurred. The last part is the one where there are people on the political left who are not going to be happy about this. And even some people in the political center who are moderates, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, is that we have to actually take seriously having some form of armed personnel that is trained in schools. I'm not talking about, Sally's third grade teacher, Mrs. Smith, who's 65 years old. I'm not talking about that. What
Hmm.
I'm saying is that in Florida, we actually developed a program where you can actually train school personnel to be sentinels. They would be essentially deputized by local law enforcement. But it's a high bar to be involved in a program like that. Like, you have to go through psychological evaluations. You have to go through the necessary training and keep the training up. But we all know the best first responder in these incidents is somebody who is at the school themselves, somebody who unfortunately is at the event when these disaster strikes. That's the best first responders that you can ever get. And I think that these mass shooters, the one thing we know about them is they might be crazy, but they're not stupid. They pick targets that they know are soft targets on purpose. They do not go to places where basically they think that they're going to be repelled.
Yeah, they're cowards. I mean, look, they don't want to fight. They want to slaughter, right? And as you say, they look for the places where they think they can get away with that and achieve that goal. Congressman, listen, I cannot thank you enough for your time. One last question for you. You know, you talk about mental health, you talk about school security. Both of those are part of the Senate agreement that appears to be headed for passage, along with, things like grants to states. They can set up red flag laws if they want, but they don't have to. You've got, looking into the juvenile records of 18, 19, and 20-year-olds, which is going to ultimately mean a waiting period for young adults who are, lawfully trying to purchase a firearm. Have you had a chance to take a look at the Senate legislation, and have you made up your mind as to whether or not you're going to vote for it or vote against it?
Well, I haven't taken a look at the whole legislation. I'll tell you, I have real concerns about red flag laws. When I was in the Florida legislature, I voted against the school safety bill because it contained red flag laws. Look, the reality is red flag laws take away the Fifth Amendment due process rights of legal gun owners. I understand where people say we want to get guns out of the hands of people who are mentally unfit. I understand that. But in the United States, every American citizen has due process rights. We cannot eviscerate due process rights because of our concern that somebody in the family or a neighbor might have. You have to give people their legitimate ability to defend themselves in the court of law. That is our system of government. Based upon that alone, I can't support the legislation. I think the aspects about looking back into juvenile records, I'm actually not opposed to that because look, you got to understand track record matters here. I think if we're going to start looking at some mental health issues for people who are 15, 16, 17 about whether they can acquire guns at 18, 19, 20, you do have to look at criminal background issues from juvenile time and make a determination on, does that mean they should have the ability to purchase firearms? If somebody is a felon at the age of 18 and not able to go buy a firearm, but if they committed a felony act at 17, they can. I mean, that just doesn't make much logical sense. The thing that really concerned me, I think it's out of the Senate package now, was raising the age from 18 to 21. I thought that was a violation of constitutional rights because you would say that an 18-year-old can vote. They can be actually adjudicated as an adult in our criminal justice system. They can enter our military. They can sign legal contracts, but they don't have the mental capacity to go to a gun store and buy a rifle or a shotgun. That really made no sense at all. That's the emotional legislating that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
And so those are my thoughts, my views. But I think as of now, I'm a no.
I appreciate your candor, and I know that the raising the age to 21 was part of the Florida school safety bill. That aspect is being challenged in court right now, and I suspect that issue is going to come before the Supreme Court before long. And as you say, you talked about mental health with red flag laws. Not only do you have the due process protections, but one of the problems that I've got with red flag laws is a court says, okay, this person's dangerous. We're going to take their guns away. Now we've solved the problem, right? No mental health treatment, no mental health access, nothing like that. We've taken the guns and we think that the person is no longer dangerous. That to me gets it entirely backwards. But that's probably a conversation for another day. Congressman, again, thank you so much for joining me on the program. It's been a real pleasure. I hope we get a chance to do this again soon.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
I appreciate the representative joining us on the program today. I do hope we can have him back again in the near future. That was a really interesting conversation. I'm sorry that we had to wrap it up as quickly as we did. Right now, let's turn our attention to today's armed citizen story, our good deed of the day, and our recidivist report. We will start there. Case out of New York City, where Mayor Eric Adams freaking out about the possibility of folks lawfully being able to exercise their right to bear arms in self-defense. And yeah, he is complaining about the court system too. But he clearly sees legal gun owners as a bigger problem than stuff like this. 38-year-old man accused of attacking New York City Parks cop just weeks after he was released from prison. Yep. Staten Island Live reports that Anthony Maniscalco has an extensive criminal record that includes violent encounters with law enforcement officers and about 50 prior arrests. He was apprehended shortly after assaulting a City Parks Department enforcement patrol officer over the weekend. Happened on June 10th, around 8 p.m. Maniscalco is reported to have punched the officer one time in the face. Officer transported to local hospital for treatment afterwards. Suspect refused to be handcuffed. He's now been indicted on charges that include assault, obstructing government administration, resisting arrest, and disorderly conduct. Again, more than 50 prior arrests, most recently released on parole on April 28th of this year after being convicted of assault and criminal contempt and sentenced to 51 months to 5 years in prison. This comes after assaulting two New York police officers who were trying to arrest him on Valentine's Day back in 2018. So multiple stints, however, in prison for convictions of crimes committed back on Staten Island, 18 months to 3 years for conviction of grand larceny auto back in 2014, 2 years in prison for criminal sale of a controlled substance in 2008. And the Staten Island Live says the 38-year-old felon has played a role in a number of, quote, high-profile incidents. Arrested, for instance, in 2016 after allegedly challenging cops to a fight in the street, kicking an officer in the chest while he was in the hospital. In that case, he ultimately pleaded guilty to assault in the third degree and was sentenced to just 6 months in jail. He was also served months behind bars for menacing and other charges. And again, each time, I wouldn't even say that every time Maniscalco gets a slap on the wrist. He served about 80% of his 5-year sentence most recently. The problem is that he keeps getting out and he keeps going on to commit more crimes, some of them very serious, some of them very violent. And apparently he's kind of stuck in this cycle where he's committing these offenses that, again, you and I would consider pretty serious, but the law apparently does not. And so you're caught in this cycle of rinse and repeat. And rather than try to address that issue, New York lawmakers, of course, are trying to criminalize our right to keep and bear arms. Today's armed citizen story, Clearwater, Florida, where a woman who was attacked in her bedroom managed to shoot and kill the man who was attacking her. This happened Tuesday morning, just before 9 a.m. The woman called 911, said that she had woken up to find a stranger in her bedroom. The stranger, identified by police as 26-year-old Justin William Wright. Police said that he did live on the same road as the victim. The chief of police there in Clearwater, Florida, Daniel Slaughter, says she was able to reach out and call 911 during this attack, but the attack persisted, at which time she was able to retrieve a gun that she had lawfully. According to police, she then fired that gun, striking Wright and killing him. Slaughter said that the woman had injuries that were consistent with a self-defense situation. He said, quote, "We're going to avoid talking about too many of the details, but I can tell you that she was asleep in that residence. She was attacked. She does have injuries that are consistent with that attack." He said the investigation is still ongoing. He said, "We certainly don't want to just chalk it up to self-defense and move on." He said there's an awful lot of work that has to occur. The crime scene is going to be investigated just like any other death or murder or homicide, or as in this particular case, potentially a justified homicide. So while police have not said officially that the woman is not facing any charges, they have made it abundantly clear that this woman in Clearwater, Florida, was in fact attacked and was defending her life when she shot and killed the man who broke into her home in the middle of the evening. Actually, not even in the middle of the evening, broad daylight, almost 9 a.m. in the morning. Now, today's a good deed of the day from West Allis, Wisconsin, where police and firefighters responded to the scene of a trailer fire and were swiftly able to rescue a 3-year-old trapped inside. This caught on body cam. You can see an image there of one of the officers breaking a window of the trailer to gain entry to the home. This was early Sunday, Father's Day. The West Allis police shared the video on Tuesday showing the moments that occurred where that 3-year-old was taken away. It started with an officer, running towards the danger, running towards the flames, used a baton to break a window. Another police officer arrived then to help rescue that 3-year-old. But even after he was lifted up, he was still out of reach. So a firefighter ended up having to break the glass, ripped off the window frame, and then made his way into that trailer. And 30 seconds later, that 3-year-old boy identified as MJ was carried away, taken to an ambulance about 6 minutes after the initial call was made. He was taken to a hospital. At last report, was listed as stable. Family has lost almost all of their possessions in the fire, but they did not lose their child. And they said on Tuesday that thank you will never be enough to the individuals who helped rescue their 3-year-old. So in the right place, at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. Those police and fire officials there in West Allis, Wisconsin, for saving the life of that 3-year-old child, we thank you for your very good deed. Now, that is all the time we've got for you on this edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company. I want to thank you for being a part of the program. As always, we will be back tomorrow. In fact, tomorrow could be a busy day because we could see a final vote in the Senate on this gun deal. We could also see the Supreme Court release its decision in New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin. I'm not guaranteeing that that's going to happen. But there are 13 cases left before the Supreme Court. They are releasing more opinions on Thursday morning. We will be watching. We will be talking about it. If it doesn't come down tomorrow, it's likely going to come down next week. So we are on Bruin watch right now, and we'll be talking about it on tomorrow's Cam & Company. Be sure to check out BearingArms.com throughout the day for even more of the latest Second Amendment news and information that you need to know about. And if you like what you see, you can always become a VIP subscriber. Just use the promo code GUNRIGHTS, and you'll get a significant savings on your VIP membership. And as our way of saying thanks, we're going to give you exclusive content. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Until then, be well, be safe, miss the cue again, and be free.